Hello and welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Kerber, and I'm joined today by a very busy mom of two spirited boys who's become, as she says, an accidental entrepreneur. Amanda Diehl spends her work time creating safe and powerful spaces for women to connect, and her other time hiking mountains and living the Montana adventure. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sue. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here because I want to talk about all of the amazing and unique things that you're doing. So let's start by chatting about your gift for being able to hold space for women in a way that results in meaningful relationships. Tell us about the journey that led you to want to do this.
Oh boy. Well, it was an accident, it felt like. And now that I'm in my fifth year of doing this, I know that it is absolutely what God put me on this earth to be doing, is to be bringing women together in ways that allow us to elevate one another that we don't really experience. It was just an accident altogether.
Tell us about that accident because I love that term accidental entrepreneur. Yet here you are, the owner of a very amazing collaborative for women, bringing women together from all over the state to form these types of relationships that you're talking about. How about we just launch into Sky Oro's origin story?
So back to your earlier question, this thing that God put me on this earth to do, I never could have guessed that this would be the thing because truthfully, I do have an entrepreneurial spirit and I never really knew it. If we went back to the beginning, I was relatively fresh out of grad school working for a company that was in the health technology space. We built immunization registries, and this was prior to 2020. And I was working in Helena, Montana, which is my hometown, as a consultant. And so I had this dream job out of grad school where I was impacting public health. I was working with clients. I got to travel. I was remote from my company. And the truth of it was that I would go to work in the health department. There is a certain air about a health department that is like very cubicle land where it's really hard to make change because it's part of government and bureaucracy. And I was this energized young chick who really didn't have much experience under my belt. So I'd go to work there, but then I would come home. And to keep me from going native, my company actually mandated that I work from home a few days a week. So that was fun at the beginning. And then it very quickly got old. And I realized, wow, I really love being surrounded by people who are smarter than me, people who are working on things that I can't even fathom or understand, but I still get to overhear the conversation. In addition to that, I did get to travel for my company quite a bit. They were based in Phoenix, and we went through this whole innovative transition where I got to experience what it looked like to innovate a company. And I didn't know what that was prepping me for, but it was really cool in hindsight. My company had a lot of software engineers, and they got to work out of this beautiful collaborative workspace in downtown Phoenix that I got to go check out. And in my brain, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I would love something like this in Helena. Just happened to mention it to my brother, who is in architecture. And I was like, Colton, we could totally build something like this. It would have to be a really beautiful place. He forwards me this article about Audrey Gelman, who was the CEO and one of the co-founders of The Wing, which was like the OG community and co-working space for women. And I was like, oh my gosh, co-working and this spin on supporting women, how incredible. And I just really loved her vision and what she was building. Like I had done with probably 20 other entrepreneurial business ideas, I just started talking to people about what this might look like. And this one stuck. It stuck in a way that I can't even explain, that I have always said, this is happening through me. I am simply a conduit. Out of the conversations that I had, I started at the university here in Bozeman because I'm an alumni. They have a really cool entrepreneurial like launch pad for students, alumni, faculty, etc. And I basically word vomited my idea all over this man and his student. And he was like, I have somebody that I would like to connect you with. I had heard of this woman before. She was one of the original women bringing women small business owners together in Bozeman. This was back in like 2017 or 2018, I think. and he connected me to her, and she agreed to have a conversation. Word vomited my idea all over her for the second time I've ever said it fully out loud to anybody. And then she ended up connecting me to a woman named Christina who would come to be my co-founder, who actually already had the company concept of Sky Oro established. She had the LLC. She had been having conversations with women in Bozeman about building a really intentional space to bring women together. And she was coming at it from the perspective of, I live in Big Sky, I work with my coworkers and I go home to my family and it's like the six of us and like that's my community, and I really want to expand it. I reached out to her and said, just in the spirit of women supporting women, I think these are the exact words, would you be open to connecting and just having a conversation about what you're wanting to bring to life with me? She's like, sure, why not? So from the very get-go, my experience has been when we are courageous enough to reach out and say what we're thinking or our idea, that verbal processing allows things to become possible. So we sat down and connected. And in the 1 hour that we met, she shared with me what her vision was. We identified where she was getting stuck. She was having a hard time with finding the funding and finding the place and just a number of things, that come up when you're trying to build something big. I would never have even gotten that far on my own. But the moment that my energy entered the equation and she had the balls in motion, if you will, that was when everything changed. Here I was sitting on the other side of the table, just like soaking up everything that she was saying because I was so inspired. And at the end, I said, okay, so one, I'm 2 or 3 months pregnant. Two, I don't live in Bozeman yet, but I'm moving here soon. And three, I've had this idea for 3 months. You've been working on it for a year, but would you like to be partners? And she was like, sure, why not? And that is literally how this started.
So had you planned to move to Bozeman before all of this started? That was already in process?
That was in process. It was meant to be. My partner and I had actually been long distance for my entirety of grad school, and then I had moved back to Helena. At the point my job went fully remote, where I was no longer required to be at the health department in Helena, we talked about me moving here. And we had actually just put an offer in on the house we live in now that wasn't built yet. So at the time that I sat down with Christina, there was a lot of stuff in the works, but nothing was finalized. I still lived in Helena. Our house did not have walls yet. And I was just like, this is the direction I want to go. But then we leaned into the resources that we have, which were coming from the wing at that point. They had partnered with a company called I Fund Women. They were building out a crowdfunding platform specifically for women founded companies. We applied to be part of this accelerator that the wing had going on. I Fund Women won the accelerator. We didn't even get looked at. But then, as a thank you and a salute to all of the women that had applied, I Fund Women offered free coaching, an opportunity to utilize their platform to do our own crowdfunding. And that's really how we learned about the concept of doing a founding member drive, which is what initially allowed Sky Oro to become what it is today. We made this plan to launch this in the spring of 2019. And we did that. And I had a 1-month-old son who joined us at the beginning of April. We kicked this thing off. We had our first event ever to put this out into the world on April 30th. We had this audacious goal that we felt of raising $200,000 and finding 200 founding members. And 6 weeks later, we closed having raised just shy of $250,000 and 233 members, a couple of them some very supportive men in this community who wanted to help us see this thing through. It's obviously a long origin story, but it's so powerful because we had this huge goal that people wanted to be a part of. People recognized that it was a really cool thing we were doing. And in order for it to happen, people had to say yes to it. And so then people shifted from this, oh, that'd be a cool thing to happen, to like, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a founding member of that. I want to help it come to life. All of these things are so divine. Who knows? Like, I could never have done anything like that on my own. Christina had been trying for over a year to push this thing forward and was hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And these two strangers came together and we recognized, hey, two's better than one. Let's do this thing. And we did it.
You've been talking a lot about the power of connection And
Yeah.
then you've also been talking a lot about the importance of impact.
Yeah.
So, power of connection and impact, obviously, two very, very important things to the mission of the work that you're doing and really the whole culture of Sky Oro. How do you continue to grow this impact and why is this so important?
I probably could talk for 3 hours about the importance of physical, in person, face to face connection. At a cellular level, our bodies and our nervous systems regulate to the people that we're around. The reality of a lot of our lives, mine included, is I don't stand a chance to be regulated in my day to day life if I don't go into the physical place that is Sky Oro because I'm a mom of two busy kids. Just in general, so much is asked of us and we don't have these really quiet, intentional, mess free places to plug in. The power of physically walking into Sky Oro is incredible. You felt it, Sue. You've held events in there. You've seen the way that women interact in there. You've seen the way women interact when they're not in there. Like, you know.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yes.
There are actually crystals in the floor of that space because we were so blessed to be able to build it out. And one of our founding members is Breezy Cutler, the magical babe. She went in and put stones all over the space. So there are a lot of reasons why it feels so good when you walk in there. What I have here is the power of being in person and the power of coming together into a physical space. And that is what I continue to see conversation after conversation after conversation. It's just like I couldn't even have imagined how cathartic being in a place like this and a space like this in a setting surrounded by people who choose to be there because they want to be intentional and surround themselves with intentional people. That's one piece of the power of it. The second piece that I have learned that I never would have guessed is how much of an impact it has to hear a question be asked that has been thoughtfully come up with and is meant to provoke going inward and reconnecting with self, to not only have somebody ask you a question that makes you think deeply or encourages you to think deeply, and you have the space and time and quiet to do it, but then to hear the way that other people are processing it, it's mind blowing. We don't get that input from other people in our day to day normal settings, right? We don't get to hear people's inner workings of their minds in a really vulnerable way where it's not coming out as like a self judgment thing. It's coming out of, I'm curious about this. I'm thinking about this. I'm digging deep and I'm willing to share it verbally here. So there's a lot of power that comes in the processing we get to do when somebody else carves out space for us that is designed to help us heal in one way or another, and then to be physically next to somebody doing the same thing and then to hear what they have to say.
I've been to some events at Sky Oro. I went to one very recently. It was an executive women's group that got together, and some of what you're talking about happened in that space. Those conversations, the opportunity to connect with women in a very deep and powerful and meaningful way. What have you seen in the time that you've had this open?
Oh man, so much.
Do you have maybe
um
one cool story that you could share? Something that
yeah,
happened because of Sky Oro that you just never imagined?
I have a couple cool examples. This one doesn't have lots of detail to it, but we have speed networking events. And the whole point is to get to have conversation with other women. One of them, my intention was to do a lot of practicing of just speaking our truth, speaking what it is that we're here to put into the world, taking up space around what we want to provide and what we offer and what we're struggling with. And the first time that this ever occurred to me, how powerful it is, I asked the question, what is your zone of genius? What does it look like? And while you're thinking about what your zone of genius is, what are some ways that you could spend more time there and lessen the amount of time that you spend operating in a place that really maybe you don't have any business operating there? Because if we're really honest about the time, the short time we have on this earth, like why don't we spend it being really good at what we're really good at in our God-given talents versus trying to be good at something that we're not designed to do well, right? Like that's just a lot of wasted energy. We got around the room and a woman shared that back. She was like, I had never thought about what my zone of genius is, or really what that even means to my ability to be productive or have an impact on my life. So to think about that is really powerful, but then to hear all of these women either be really clear on where their zone of genius is or not be really clear, and then get the resources, whether it's a book or a podcast or something that you can listen to, because that naturally comes up, right? To be able to pull from that and see, like, I'm not alone. There's no shame in not knowing. So her takeaway was, wow, I haven't been asked this question before. I've never thought about it like this before. And now I get to go and spend some time with this, because that's life changing. If you can even just have a tiny little tweak of, what do I do really well? And maybe I focus 5% or 10% more on what I do really well, the joy that can come from that and the vibrancy that shows through you, it changes so much, not only for us, but for the people around us. That's the power of these gatherings.
What is your zone of genius?
For sure, connecting people. What I do just naturally, where my brain goes, I'll have a conversation, and I like to ask questions to learn, what are you doing? What are you excited about? What lights you up? Where are you feeling challenged in that? What are you wanting to put out into the world? And I have enough of these conversations where I'm trying to get to those places with people that I go to the next one and the next one. And within the next few conversations, there's somebody down the line here who has exactly what this person back here is needing, and I can make that connection. Or this person has exactly what they're looking for, and I can make that connection. And my whole goal with Sky Oro is really to take myself out of the center of that. I've worked really hard to build something that women have access directly to one another. It's a big challenge to have that invitation to be vulnerable about what you need and what you're offering and feel good about it. Really quickly though, you asked for some concrete examples, and one other one that I want to share. It's this really interesting effect of coming into a room that you may or may not be really comfortable in, you may or may not have ever been there before, but the intentionality of the energy is so focused on inviting vulnerability and authenticity that it just seeps into women's bones and into their soul. And what I have seen on numerous occasions is a group of women coming together. Many of them don't know each other, never had a conversation with one another, never even seen each other before. We get into the way that we do things at Sky Oro, which, as you have experienced, is very special and very mindful and very focused on honoring every woman in the room. And without fail, things come up for women that they were not intending to share, that they have not shared with their best friends that they get together with for cocktails every Friday, that they haven't felt comfortable enough to share with their spouse, that they maybe aren't even really to the point of like being real with themselves about it, but they have to get it out because those things fester. However that happens for each person, it's different. And you get into a space where you're like, okay, it's just coming out. I've gotten to practice a lot, like setting the tone for what that looks like. And I'm starting to see that that happens without me being the first one to share something really real or something really hard. The power of that for us to get to process those things out of our bodies. The fact that we have so few places to do that makes this even more critical, I feel, for just the overall health of our society. And the funny side note about that is that I'm an accidental entrepreneur with an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in public health. I feel like this is the greatest way that I could serve public health, is through creating space where we can actually show up as ourselves.
So you're creating obviously this space in person. You've talked about how important that personal connection is with women coming together. And you're right. I can attest to that. It is a beautiful, remarkable place. I don't really have words for it because it just has this authenticity to it that's very dynamic and it's very fluid because you're never going to have the same experience, right? It just depends on who you're interacting with. But that vibe of safety is always underpinning everything that happens there. I know that you're branching out and you're bringing women together from around the state. How are you doing this? And what's your vision for this?
I have a mission that Sky Oro is the conduit for connecting at least 1,000 women professionals across the state of Montana. There was a report, and it was something like 40,000 women-owned businesses across the state of Montana. That's the diversity of Montana, right? Are the people that are here and the things that we're doing and the places we've been and the backgrounds that we have. And when you're building a business, which if you want to make it in Montana. You have to do your own thing. And why wouldn't you? The sky is the limit if you're doing the thing that only you are meant to do and it's serving other people. It's just a really cool time to be in Montana and a working woman. And my vision is that women from all corners of the state are able to connect directly with one another, no matter where they're at. And then within the different markets, if you will, of Montana, I am partnering with women who have brick and mortar locations and are interested and want to be a part of this to bring women together on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, whatever makes sense, so that we can start to have those seeds of women connecting in person, because that in person piece is so important. And then we have a member exclusive digital platform that is where members can connect with one another. I can see who's in Billings, I can see who's in Livingston, I can see who's in Miles City or in Missoula or wherever. So you can find the women that are close to you and have that be your central point of connection and still plug into all of the peripheral value of Sky Oro. And then for those who are outside of Bozeman, there will be opportunities for them to come together in person. Long term, I'm actually in the process of giving myself permission to dream about what it looks like for me to have physical locations. My vision is that there is just this really rich, well curated, heavily poured into community, that's my sole focus. And I know that that's what's necessary because there have been a number of different things in Montana that have been spearheaded, but then they don't have the intention and the energy and the focus poured into them. And women are excited about things like that. Women want to get into a group where they can find and connect with other entrepreneurs no matter where they're at. But then it falls flat when you don't have somebody really holding all of that and making sure it goes. I will say there have been lots of fails. I have attempted in multiple ways to do a virtual, I'm using air quotes here, membership. And each time I've tried it, it's fallen flat and I feel like I've nosedived. And so I've learned a lot of things about how I won't do it and what the critical components of it are. And it comes back to ability to plug in person. That's just what it comes down to.
I'm really glad that you brought up this idea of failure and how sometimes you need to have that failure in order to have the success, because I think we can get a little bit blocked by our own fear of
Yeah.
failure, thinking that we have to have it perfect right out of the gate. You are surrounded by so many female entrepreneurs who really are doing some incredible things. They are successful in all of these different spaces and business ideas. What advice would you give to women who are chasing their dreams, whether they're right at the beginning or maybe they're a little bit further along the journey? What are your thoughts for success?
If I could boil it down to like one or two things, it would be number one, get in the room with whoever you have access to, get in the room, because when you're in the room, a conversation will happen. And when a conversation happens in a room where you feel like you can at least be a tiny bit vulnerable, it spills out after that and you get excited and you can't stop thinking about it. And there's this incredible activation energy, is what I call it, that happens when you give yourself permission to just speak out loud the things that you're really truly playing with or have an idea around. Whether or not you execute on them, that's a totally different story, because if you're an entrepreneurial spirit, you have like 10,000 ideas at the beginning and it takes a lot of sifting through it to find the one that feels really good. So that would be the first thing. And then the second is, even when I have zero money, I scrape and scrounge and figure out a way to invest in myself, because nobody could have ever prepared me for the emotional growth and the personal growth and the personal development that was going to be required of me to stick with it. It's easy to have an idea and to get something started, but then to keep it going, you're in it or you're not. And if you're in it, I mean, the peaks and valleys are so many. The more that I invest in myself, the shorter the fall from the peak of the excitement and the breakthrough to the like, okay, I'm on the floor again. It just builds a lot of resilience, and resilience comes from practice and it comes from support and it comes from being surrounded by people who will just hear you and hold space for you. Just plug in. We all have community. We all have so much resource available to us. And we're just not used to practicing leaning into it. It feels really foreign. It feels really vulnerable. But the easiest way is to just, even if you don't say anything, put yourself in a room where people are talking and listen to it, because that's going to spark a lot of idea too.
What's been the best part of this journey for you?
You're going to make me cry with this. I think it's twofold. The first is that I just get to do life on my own terms. So the hard is the hard that I've self-imposed. And that's so important to me because I have two kids. And literally every single day, Sue, I'm like, how would I do this? How would I be a mom that can be there for my kids? Seeing what I'm capable of make happen. There are things I didn't share. My business partner and I split ways. So I actually have been building this not by myself, but solely at the helm of this thing. That's been a challenge. And then having kids. So seeing what I'm able to make possible and knowing that it's not happening because of me, but it's happening through me, and being able to just really build my faith has been a really powerful thing. And then along with that is the learning of how to give myself grace, because I screw things up on a daily basis and I could be paralyzed by the shame and the guilt and the doubt. And every year that lessens and lessens. And it's less the thing that's keeping me stuck. The things keeping me stuck now are like, I literally have no idea how to do that. So I'm going to try things and I'm just going to be running up against the wall of failure until I figure it out. But it's not going to be because I don't believe in what I'm capable of doing. I get to build a company that gets to set a standard and a precedent for how you build a really people-centric company. My first ever employee is a mom of a little girl. I'm a mom building a business as well. And so being able to build something that's on my own terms and still has a huge impact has been a really powerful thing. The reason it's so hard is because I am building it from scratch. Those are some of the best things personally I have really enjoyed. And they're humbling, so humbling.
You talk a lot about your boys. What legacy do you want to leave for your boys? Is there anything that you want to make sure that they know or that they learn as they see you balance all of this?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't maybe thought about it in terms of that, but I'll share this. So, an interesting part of my story is I actually never wanted to be a mom. And many years of my life, I wasn't very intentional about a lot of things. Two children later, I'm intentional about some things very much more than I was before. But my mom says to me, they're so full of personality. Bowie has fiery red hair and the personality to go with it. And then Jones is literally running football circle touchdowns for like 2 hours straight every single night. And my mom's like, they're mighty little men and they have so much purpose and so much that they get to contribute to this world. And it's my responsibility to just model the grace and the love and just the curiosity. And the thing that comes to me so often because they have so much spark and energy is, if I can do anything, it would be to not dull their spirit, right? To just learn how to honor it in the way that I am intending to honor every other woman and man that comes into my life. Just give them every chance at having the impact that they're here to have. So
How about aha moments or legacies for yourself? Is there something that you've recently discovered about yourself that was a true aha moment?
I think that something that's been kind of boiling up is that I do a couple of things really well. Everything else I do not well at all. The aha moment of just being okay with that. There's a lot of ego that comes along with building a business. And what I've learned is the more that I'm in the center of it, actually the less impact it gets to have, because I can only do so much and I'm certainly not expertly skilled at a lot of things that growing this is going to require. I think my aha moments have been all around that, and that my role is to be the connector and to be the visionary and to just have a lot of fun playing there and be willing to invest in and take the risks to invest in bringing the support everywhere else that can fill in the gaps. And that's what it takes to go from this thing that has impacts, we have 110 members now to the thing that has 1,000 members across the state of Montana. The thing that gets you from this point to this is not the thing that got you from beginning to point B, to recognize what that actually means, which in my case is removal of myself from this thing that I've been so intertwined in. It's taken me about a year to process it from the point of realization to actually being okay with starting to let go of those things.
That journey of entrepreneurship, it's not linear. In my own experience, the vision that I had of where I thought it might go from point A to point B was actually probably from point A to point Q to point C to point Z, all over the place. But what I found was I needed all of those steps, even the ones I didn't anticipate, because they foundationally set me up for the next part of the journey. So I'm glad that you brought that up where, it is not a linear progression. On that note, Amanda, one last question for you.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you know now that you wish that you had known a lot sooner? Or maybe something that's taken a while to figure out, but now you totally have it dialed in?
Okay, well, I wouldn't say totally dialed. That one thing is understanding how to manage cash flow as a business owner. Hands down, just paying attention to the money part of it. I didn't even know what a P&L stood for when we started. And I remember Christina being like, you need to learn what all of this means. It took me a long time. That will nosedive a company, and you add all of the other factors in. But I would say I'm definitely still coming out of not knowing anything about that.
Any parting words of wisdom or anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to share?
I think I will just reiterate for anybody listening who is feeling isolated or feeling unsure or unclear, what I have come to find to be true in conversation after conversation after conversation is that we, in our core, always know what we need the next step to be. There's a lot of clutter trying to tell us otherwise. And if you have the opportunity to get into a room where you can have a conversation or carve out some time for yourself to just try and sink into that, often it's even there above the noise trying to poke us, right? But we still are so good at ignoring it because it sounds scary. It sounds scary to bet on ourselves, but there's a deep knowing that we all have. And sometimes we just need permission to pay attention to what it is. And then trust you don't need to know all the steps. It's just the one next step. And there's so much learning that comes from that. When we're feeling unclear or we're feeling like we don't have what we need, we always do. It's just how willing are we to find it?
Well, thank you, Amanda, so much for taking time to chat with me today. Running a business as a full-time mom is not easy, but you make it seem that way. The energy and the encouragement that you pour into so many women is incredible, and you truly are building something very, very special here in Montana.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue. I'm honored that this is my second ever podcast appearance. So thank you for reaching out. And I just love having you in my life and as part of this community. So thank you for that as well.
You're welcome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Be sure to tune in again next week for another amazing and inspirational story here on the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. We'll see you then.